Okay, we're going to talk about valve stem to guide clearance and how to make that measurement. So let's get some naming conventions down so that we know what we're talking about here. So here I have my valve. This happens to be an intake valve on this particular cylinder head. And we've cut away this portion so that you can see down inside of this intake port. So I've got my intake valve right here, and it's moving up and down inside of the guide. So here I have a guide right here, and this guide is part of the cylinder head, and on some cylinders you can replace this, and on other cylinders it's an integral part of the, and requires some kind of reconditioning or possible replacement of the cylinder head. We're going to look at why or how to measure it and what conditions would occur if it was the clearance was wrong. Okay, so this valve slides up and down inside of this guide, and when it slides and returns to its resting position, the springs are pulling it down to this, it rides up against this valve seat. Okay, so we've got the face of the valve right here, and then it seals the upper portion of the combustion chamber, so during the combustion process I have a combustion and I prevent the gases from escaping out of the intake. Okay, then when I open up the intake, I allow the air-fuel mixture to enter into the cylinder. So this is a very important part of the combustion process, and it's very important that this is sealed, a sealed area when this is closed. Okay, so in order to measure the valve stem to guide clearance, we're talking about the stem, which is this portion of the valve right here. This is the valve stem. We need to measure it and make some comparisons. So in order to measure this, like most engine components, I want to measure it in multiple areas. So I'm going to measure it in 3 different spots. So I'm going to measure it here, in the middle, and then towards the top of the valve. So I've got my micrometer right here, and I'm making a measurement, and I'm going to record that value right there. Then I move up here to the middle portion of the valve, and I'm going to record that as well. And then I'm going to move to the top portion of the valve, and I will record the diameter there. Now you could also, if you were concerned about this valve being out of round, I could rotate the valve and then measure it again in those very same spots and make a comparison. Now generally speaking, most valves, engine manufacturers specify somewhere around 1/1000th of an inch difference. So I wouldn't want there to be more than 1/1000th of an inch difference between the top, middle, and bottom measurement. Every once in a while, some performance valves actually they change the diameter down here, so you need to look at your specific cylinder head in order to make sure that this diameter remains the same, and that's on purpose. Okay, so I've made my 3 measurements on here, and I've recorded those, and I've determined that my valve is the appropriate diameter, and it is not it's not excessively worn as it moves up and down inside of the guide. The next thing that I need to do is measure the guide itself. So down here I've got the guide, and to measure the guide I've got this tool. This is a small hole gauge. And the way that the small hole gauge works is I've got this thumb screw portion on the top, and what that's doing is it's driving in this center portion. Notice that as I tighten this up, I'm going to draw in that center portion of the tool, and I'm going to push out the diameter of the measuring portion. So I keep threading this in, and it separates, and now I have a measurement of an internal diameter. So how this is going to work in the tool, I'm going to loosen it all up. I'm going to loosen up the tool, and then I'm going to slide it down inside of the guide. Now in the guide, then I'm going to tighten this up. Okay? And what you want is you want a small amount of drag, just a little bit of drag as I bring this up and down. And I've got a little bit of drag there, okay? I don't want it too loose, but I want a little bit of drag. Now if I were to tighten this all the way and I wasn't able to move this would be too far. I'm not really measuring the interior diameter of this guide. This is a problem. So I want to just have just enough drag. And this is exactly the same as the valve itself. I want to measure this in 3 different places to ensure that the diameter remains the same throughout the guide. Okay, so I'm going to just tighten that up, get a little bit of drag. That looks good, and then I'll pull it out. And now I'm going to take my micrometer and I'm going to measure the diameter right here. Now I want to make sure that I don't have it rotated like this in measuring it. That's not an appropriate diameter. So I've got it nice and square inside of my micrometer, and then I'm going to tighten this up, and then that measurement there now is the inside diameter of the guide itself. So I'm going to make that same measurement in two additional spots to ensure that I have the appropriate diameter, and then I'm going to make a comparison. So I'm looking for the difference. Now, you know you're doing something wrong if this diameter measurement ends up being larger than this diameter. This, as we can see, slides right down inside there. Okay? This has to be smaller. This is smaller than this measurement. So you've done something wrong in your measurement if this is a larger measurement. Now, as far as about what you should have as the difference, if you have an exhaust valve, it should be approximately 1 to 3 thousandths of an inch. So the exterior diameter of this should be 1 to 3 thousandths inches smaller than the interior diameter of my guide. That's a general rule. Now you need to look at your individual engine's specifications for this clearance. It should be under valve stem to guide clearance, but that's a general rule. The intake valve is a little bit tighter clearance. It's approximately 15 10,000ths of an inch to 35 10,000ths of an inch difference between the valve stem and the valve guide. All right, so let's talk about what happens if this is not the appropriate clearance. First of all, if this is too tight, most likely what's happened is I've got some deposits inside of the guide. I've purchased the wrong valve if I'm putting a new valve in. Too tight of a valve guide is going to cause this valve to not appropriately close. My springs will not pull this valve closed, thereby leaking combustion gases and causing a misfire. Okay, so we don't want that valve to remain open when our spring is supposed to be returning it. If it's too loose of a connection, I would have a lot of play inside the valve, so the valve would not close properly against the seat itself, and I may have a condition something similar to this. Now, this particular valve wasn't necessarily a valve stem to guide clearance issue, but I get combustion gases past the valve, so this surface of the valve here, past my face and up in the upper portions, and I'll definitely have a combustion issue with this type of valve. So we want to make sure that we get the appropriate amount of clearance in order to replace that. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes this is serviceable. You can replace this. You can get something similar to this insert. This insert is just a valve guide insert that would be pressed into the cylinder head. And other times it's actually an integral part of the cylinder head, and you'd have to replace the entire cylinder head.